Now, in latest news, the Supreme Court has awarded 1 year rigorous imprisonment to Navjot Sidhu, a former cricketer turned politician, in a road rage case pertaining back to 1988. So if you're wondering why has the verdict come a long time after that incident took place, close to 34 years, well, let me tell you, it's not as simple as it sounds. It's a complicated matter, and there is a timeline that will help you understand what really happened all these 34 years and how did the Supreme Court then arrive at the decision of giving him a 1 year imprisonment. So you'll have to go back firstly to December 27th, 1988, and that is when the incident took place. Navjot Sidhu and his friend Rupinder Singh, they allegedly thrashed a 65-year-old Gurnam Singh in Patiala, that is Navjot Sidhu's hometown, after he reportedly asked them to remove their gypsy. So these two friends, that is Navjot Sidhu and Rupinder, were in a gypsy. The gypsy was parked in the middle of the road, and one 65-year-old gentleman by the name of Gurnam Singh asked them to remove it. Over this, they had a scuffle, and it is reportedly said with people that were present there that a few physical blows were dealt to the 65-year-old. Then he was rushed to the hospital, but by the time he reached the hospital, Gurnam Singh was reported dead. So the incident happened December 27th, 1988. What happened after that? Okay, now in September 1999, that is a good 11 years later, that's how long it took for the first verdict to come, the Patiala District Court and Sessions Court acquitted Mr. Sidhu and Mr. Sandhu of murder charges, citing lack of evidence. So they were acquitted, no fine, no jail term for that, after 11 years of litigation. What happens after that? Then a few years later, in 2002, the Punjab government filed an appeal in the Punjab and Haryana High Court against their acquittal. So remember, 3 years the matter was dead and buried. They were acquitted, so they had a clean chit by the court, but the Punjab government filed an appeal in the Punjab and Haryana High Court against Navjot Sidhu. And this is a very, very interesting episode. Let me try and explain the politics behind what happened here. Now in 2002, the government changed hands in Punjab. Before that, it was the Badal government. In 2002, Amrinder Singh came back as Chief Minister of Punjab, and it's under his government that they filed an appeal to reopen this case. And that is why, if you're wondering today, when Navjot Sidhu and you had someone like Captain Amrinder Singh both in the Congress party, why was there a tiff between them? Probably the roots of that go back to 2002 and probably even before that. But in 2002, that rivalry took another ugly turn when under Chief Minister Amrinder Singh, they filed an appeal on a case that had been dead and buried. So from there on, the matter came into hearing again, and probably that is, as I said, probably planted those seeds which led to this ugly rivalry that has continued for years between Amrinder Singh and Navjot Sidhu. Just to remind you, when that appeal had happened, Navjot Sidhu at that time had taken help of the late Arun Jaitley, who was a well-known lawyer. He helped him, deal with this case or argue his case or even give him some legal opinion how to fight this particular case. And then, if you remember, 2 years later, this is happening in 2002, it's literally Congress versus BJP, and you could see Mr. Jaitley helping Navjot Sidhu out. What happens 2 years later? Interestingly, 2004, Navjot Sidhu fights election on a BJP ticket from Amritsar and wins. So this is where his political journey also started, and this case had a major role to play in that. Okay, then what happens in December 2006? The High Court finds Mr. Sidhu and Mr. Sandhu guilty of culpable homicide. Now remember, the Sessions Court had given them a clean chit, but years later they have been found guilty by the High Court of culpable homicide. Just to explain for the uninitiated, what is culpable homicide? This was culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The difference between murder and culpable homicide is, in homicide, yes, there is a physical harm done to the person, but the death is not intentional. It is not pre-planned. That is the biggest difference. So the death is not pre-planned. because of an act or probably a physical blow or a physical act, the death does happen, in which case there is culpable homicide, but it's not pre-planned. A murder is pre-planned when you're actually planning to kill a guy. In this case, there was a scuffle that happened, and then at the heat of the moment, there were a few blows landed to the gentleman, he died. So then it amounts to culpable homicide, and that is what the High Court upheld, and then it sentenced both of them, Mr. Sandhu and Mr. Sidhu, 3 years in jail and imposed the fine of 1 lakh each. But that was also not the end of the matter. That was December 2006. May 2018, the Supreme Court, the matter went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court set aside, because Navjot Sidhu filed an appeal, the Supreme Court set aside the Punjab and Haryana High Court's court order convicting Mr. Sidhu of culpable homicide, which literally means it overturned it, but fined him 1,000 rupees. That's it. Remember, earlier fine was 1 lakh rupees, 3 years in prison. What the Supreme Court did, overruling what the High Court did, fine them just 1,000 and no jail term for them. That is what happened in May of 2018. Also not the end of the matter. In September of 2018, the top court agreed to examine a review petition filed by the family members of Gurnam Singh, the deceased. They filed a review petition, and then Supreme Court agreed to hear the matter once again, and that is what has happened now. Now is the decision that has come after that review petition was filed. May 19th, 2022, the Apex Court, the Supreme Court, reverses its decision and sentences Navjot Singh Sidhu to 1 year's rigorous imprisonment, 34 years after the road rage case of 1998. I hope this timeline will give you an idea, give you an overview of what really transpired 34 years ago and where we have reached now with this punishment that the Supreme Court has given the former cricketer turned politician. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Sports Today for more such content.